We're going to cross over to God's own country right now, go to Chicago and talk to our friend from the Republican Overseas Organisation here in London, but he's visiting his home country at the moment, indeed his hometown, Chicago. He is the great Greg Swenson. Welcome, Greg.
Great to see you, Kevin.
I'm a great admirer of your country, as you well know, but I think
you are.
I think your current president has let you down badly today, and I'm sure you agree. Let's just remind ourselves of Joe Biden denying that he would ever pardon his ridiculous son, Hunter. Let's have a look.
I'm extremely proud of my son, Hunter. He has overcome an addiction. He's one of the brightest, most decent men I know. And I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I'd abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
So, Greg, he was lying. Today he forgave, or he pardoned Hunter. Hunter, of course, a very nefarious individual. He recently pleaded guilty to tax felonies in California, and that's what he's been forgiven for. But I mean, to stare the American people in the face and say, "I will not pardon my son," which, by the way, would have been the right thing to do, and then to do it. I mean, that is a measure of the man. I think that underlines what a dreadful, pathetic president you've had for the past 4 years.
He really is. He's corrupt, and let's face it, he's a bad guy. He's a really bad guy, always has been, but especially in the last 4 years. And you talk about lying. I mean, he lied about Afghanistan. You know, he said it was a success. Inflation was transitory. The border is closed. You know, Robert Hur is a liar. Joe Biden is just fine. The great cover-up of 2024. And then he comes back with, "I will not pardon Hunter," which nobody really believed, but he said it repeatedly. And, you know, talked about respecting juries and democratic norms and all this garbage. But the other big issue, Kevin, to consider is he didn't just pardon Hunter. You know, he didn't pardon him just for the tax evasion, or the most recent tax evasion, and pardon for the gun crime. He pardoned him for 10 years of criminal activity. He pardoned him for the first 4 years of tax evasion, which, you know, the Justice Department let escape the statutes of limitations. But in many ways, Joe Biden just pardoned himself, because he's tied to all this stuff. Nobody cares about Hunter's addiction. Plenty of people have addiction issues. They deal with it, but they also don't blame their addiction problems for all their criminal activity. And if they do, you know, they pay their dues for it. And so, but he's forgiven him for 10 years of criminal activity, much of which hasn't even been investigated yet. But more importantly, he's pardoning himself, because he's tied to most of it: the influence peddling, the grift, the money coming from China, Ukraine, Russia, Romania, Kazakhstan. It's countless, and this is a way for Biden to shut that whole thing down. Joe Biden.
Yeah, and he's saying that he's excusing what he's done today, because he's saying, well, you know, normally people don't get done for this kind of tax felony thing. And the gun conviction that he got in Delaware recently, well, nobody gets done for that. Nobody gets done for filling the form in wrongly, as if somehow...
Also a lie.
Yeah.
Also a complete lie. Yeah.
So these are his excuses. So he's saying that his son has been singled out because he's the son of the president. You know, this is not fair. Well, what about the lawfare against Donald Trump? The hypocrisy of Joe Biden is off the scale.
It's unbelievable, the gall that he has, and to say it in public and then make an excuse in his comments about the pardon. He should have just pardoned him and let it go. Instead, he had to talk about how he had this unfair treatment. Look, 2,500 people were indicted and prosecuted by the IRS just in 2022. Over 90% were convictions. So to argue that, you know, Hunter Biden only was prosecuted because of his last name is completely obscene. It's over 90%. And then, of course, on the gun charge, okay, I do understand the argument that a paperwork violation, that sounds familiar, like the bookkeeping entry that Donald Trump made in New York, which is a misdemeanor, of course, elevated by Alvin Bragg to a felony. But ignoring that for a second, you know, okay, The paperwork, maybe you don't get jail time for that. I don't know. But he also threw the gun in a garbage can, in a rubbish can, across the street from a school. That's also a crime. So, to make excuses and blame it on addiction issues is completely obscene. Most of the embezzlement and the money laundering and the influence peddling was done in 2014 and 15 when Joe Biden was vice president. I don't think he had addiction issues at that time. If he did, he covered it up rather well. His wife busted him for soliciting prostitutes overseas. That's also called trafficking and is against the law. All of that's been washed away right now.
Yeah. So he was due to be, Hunter was due to be sentenced on the 12th of December for the tax evasion in California, felony tax evasion, federal tax charges. And then 4 days later, on the 16th of December, he would have been sentenced on the gun offences. So lest we forget, the state of California's case against Hunter Biden for tax evasion would be that he didn't pay $1.4 million in taxes, but spent that money lavishly on drugs, sex workers and luxury items. That was California's case, and it would have been devastating to Joe Biden. This isn't the American way. This is pathetic. It's pathetic. And Joe Biden should have been a man about it. He's behaved like an idiot, to be honest with you.
He has, but again, he's tied to all of this stuff, and that's what's different about other presidents when they pardon people. They pardon them because maybe they thought they were over persecuted or spent too much time in jail already, and they paid their dues. There's some sympathy with some of these pardons, and again, that's subjective, and I know it's not always, the public doesn't always appreciate that, but in this case, all of these crimes, or most of the crimes, are affiliated or associated with Joe Biden and his brother James. So all those 20 shell companies, that's just probably going away right now. This was a great way for Biden to make sure that nobody is going to, and I hope I'm wrong, but make sure nobody looks into the 20 shell companies that Hunter set up to launder the money, some of which was going to Joe, the famous 10% for the big guy. It was documented. It was on an email on the Hunter Biden laptop. It's been validated. And Joe received $40,000 the day after Hunter and James Biden received $400,000. Do the math.
Yeah,
so this is really outrageous.
And we still have never had a proper explanation for why, when Joe Biden was vice president, his son Hunter, who knows about as much about the oil industry as I do, in nothing, was earning $50,000 a month from Ukraine. From their oil industry. So we still haven't had an explanation for that. I just think that this is not presidential. It's not American. It's all wrong. Do you think, though, if presidents are going to act like this, I mean, I'm not going to blame Donald Trump. Presumably he'll pardon himself for his felony convictions in New York. I wouldn't blame him for that, because if I can use the phrase, they were trumped up charges anyway. Totally. But we're going to have presidents pardoning people left, right and centre. Personally, Greg, I think America should ditch the presidential pardon thing, because today America looks like a banana republic, and he has demeaned your country. And if presidents are going to act like this, then let's get rid of the presidential pardon thing.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea, and I think it's a shame, because I'm sure there's times where it's useful, and there's some sympathy involved, or doing what's right for the country, like when Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon. But in this case, it's been totally abused, and I'm sure there's instances in the past where they've overdone it with pardons. But again, when Trump did it, when other presidents have done it, they did it with some sympathy, but also the people they pardoned either had served jail time already, or more importantly, were not affiliated or tied to any criminal activity that could possibly involve President Trump. So this is just a moment for Joe to pardon himself. And by the way, he's just made the best argument for Donald Trump being president and the Democrats being out of power. If anybody had any doubt after the election, this was the icing on the cake.
Yeah, I mean, you're over there right now, Greg, and even from across the Atlantic, we're sensing that millions of Americans are embarrassed and furious about this. And Steve Bannon said over the weekend, he said the way the Democrats have been behaving, the way they have governed this country, he said he thinks that the Republicans, MAGA, if you like, may be in for 50 years of rule, 50 years in charge. And with Biden today, I think he's made that a serious possibility. I mean, this is not to be underestimated, what he did today. Americans have a sense of fairness and a sense of decency. They will look at this and say, this is corrupt and wrong.
Yeah, and look, any of these partisan hacks that are making the argument that, oh, you know, Hunter would not have been prosecuted if he wasn't Joe Biden's son, completely obscene. By the way, that's 4 years of, you know, after 4 years of weaponization of the justice system against Donald Trump. But really, it's so outrageous that I think this will have a long-lasting effect on the Democrat Party. A lot of Democrats have come out. I just saw Tim Ryan on Fox News, former congressman from Ohio. He ran for president. They wouldn't let him debate Joe Biden. They wouldn't put him on the ballot in states where he wanted to run. This is you know, really just the final straw of 4 years of abusing the system, and people are really upset about it here. I think, again, they just buried themselves, if they weren't buried already, after having Kamala and the great cover-up of Biden. But you know, the list is long, but I think this one is really bad. And I do honestly think that, you know, I hope Trump doesn't, you know, abuse the pardon system himself. I don't think he will. And he's been fairly consistent with past presidents in the use of the pardon. But this might be the last straw, and maybe we have to fix that system.
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't blame Trump for pardoning himself for the New York convictions, because
of course,
they were ridiculous anyway.
They were completely obscene.
But you know, following on from what Joe Biden's done, it just makes the whole presidential pardon system look ridiculous. And you know, I don't like saying this, but I feel a bit embarrassed for your country today, and I think a lot of people feel the same.
It's not a great moment, and I think, again, President Biden has just made a complete fool of himself. And the other thing to remember, Kevin, I don't think he cares. He's really bitter about getting tossed to the side of the road, you know, in July, when he kept, you know, again, he covered up, you know, but they all participated in the cover up. And then they changed their mind because he was polling so poorly against Trump. So they kicked him to the side of the road. He's still bitter about that. Dr. Jill, very bitter about that. So I think this was his last chance for the great middle finger to the Democrat Party. Thank you very much. And I don't care what I do to the party. I'm just going to look after me and my family.